Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of St. Lucia and the diaspora, and those in the diaspora. Welcome once again to Moving Forward. I feel sad to say to you tonight that we have had our 10th murder for the year on Saturday night, the 3rd of February, 2024. It is without a doubt a sad state of affairs because many of our young are those who seem to think that brutality and putting fear into others is the best way forward. They want power at all costs because they were and are simple failures in their lives. They simply believe that killing another is the only way to settle their differences. It seems that a minor conflict in this country can turn into a murder, and I'm seeing it in both young men and women who show simply no respect for each other. We are definitely at a crossroads and have to make up our minds as a country as to whether we decide once and for all to bring back capital punishment or execution for murder of the heinous type of crimes that we have seen with this particular murder. The United States are now warning their citizens that the Bahamas and Jamaica is not safe to visit because of the violence and murders that is randomly occurring in these countries. We therefore have to be conscious of that, as at present we do depend on tourism. Before going any further, I want to introduce a few words by the ambassador of Taiwan in regards to China willfully, like a little child, violating the median lines of airspace of Taiwan. Their attitude is grotesque because they have a totalitarian and absolute dictator as their leader. This individual wants to practice communism, and yet he has failed to live a life that shows he believes in what he preaches. And it is the same with his family. At least Chairman Mao lived a life of humility, yet Xi Jinping lives an opulent life, no different to the Russian leader Putin. Yet they are the strongest advocates of communism, and they have the gall to pretend that their form of one-man rule is the best way for any country, more so like those in Africa and South America, which in theory they control. Even in parts of the world like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, look at the confusion they have caused, and have they infiltrated those countries by putting monies in the pockets of these rulers? We must be determined not to fall for their deviousness. Even in the Caribbean, many are asking at this juncture, who owns Jamaica? This is a very serious question for the people of that island. China is breaking international aviation rules by what is taking place in Taiwan's airspace. And they are so stupid. They think they are punishing Taiwan for continuing to stay with a DPP president in their last election. They tried their best to get their man in position of president so they could manipulate the individual as they did with the past KMT President Ma. I've said enough. So at this juncture, let us hear the ambassador, Peter Chen, as to what he has to say. Here is Peter Chen.
Good day. I am Peter Chen. As the ambassador of the Republic of China, Taiwan, I would like to urge all of my St. Lucian friends to join me in condemning China's unilateral announcement on January 30th, in effect revoking the 2015 cross-strait agreement on the M503, W122, and W123 flight routes, which seriously jeopardize aviation safety, peace, and stability in the region. According to International Civil Aviation Organization's regulations, changes to any route network should be made only after the coordination with all parties concerned. However, as M503 route lies next to the Taipei Flight Information Region, China changes a related route network without prior consultations with Taiwan. It constitutes a serious violation of ICAO regulations. China's unreasonable and provocative act has not only gravely impacted regional aviation safety, but also signified a change to the status quo across the Taiwan Strait. We urge the international community to pay close attention to this matter and jointly demand China promptly negotiate with Taiwan on the new flight routes. I thank you.
I concur with him. Oh, tonight, I'm in a fighting mood because my program has had an effect of some of the United Records of the Poor supporters. I would like to stick to my policy standard where it says, where ignorance is bliss, it is folly to be wise. That has always been my motto in life. More so when I went to England. I tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, there are some really stupid and uneducated people in this country that seem hell-bent on standing up for what is dishonest and unjust because those they supported always used to give them the crumbs. But they are not in power. So they dislike those who they think supports this government. I want to remind some of my paid distractors something I learned many years ago, that evil that some men and women do lives after them. The good is often interred in their bones. So let it be with them. We remember the likes of Hitler, Mussolini, Lenin, and many others. However, those who were not evil and will always be remembered, they will be the likes of, as I mentioned before, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, what a lovely lady. They have a place in our hearts. Why? Because these individuals live to make life better for the poor, the underprivileged, the aged, the people who are of age, the sick, the disabled, the dying. So I'm not bothered because I speak the truth and for telling it as it is and as it has been from 216 to 221, or as it was. I believe sincerely in being objective in what I say and do and support what is right and not what is evil or wrong or has an air of superficial feeling about it. Yes, at one time I did get upset with the Labour Party because I allowed my emotions to run away with what mattered. Therefore, I say this to you listeners of Moving Forward, whether in St. Lucia or in the diaspora, that mine eyes have seen the glory and the coming of the One Most High, because he sent Philip J. Pierre, a humble man, to be the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. I will say this and continue to say it. What is tremendous about him is that he bided his time. And as he has said, being Prime Minister is only for a time, and it's so true. Life itself is for a time. Even though we live to be 100 years old, there are those in our small island who support evil and are sometimes evil themselves. They refuse to see the truth from what is because it does not correspond with what they want to see or hear. So they fabricate the way of thinking to suit what they want, regardless whether it hurts others or not. Oh, I'm so happy that those reprobates, as I call them, are listening to Moving Forward. And I want to hear what they have to say because it amuses the real listeners of this program. We want to hear the truth. I do like them to be listening for another reason, because they are being educated without them realizing it. Because I truly begin to let them know what is right and what is wrong. So tonight, let me say by sending condolences to the families of that young man that was brutally murdered by being gunned down in the manner in which he was, like an animal in Maynard Hill. May his soul rest in peace. I'm truly at a loss as to why anyone can think that he or she has the right to take another's life so when it deals with gun violence and the idea of turf wars. I have said this before, and therefore I believe that the government should now reinforce the SSU in terms of size and training, and to give them that certain armor to fight the gun violence that has now become the norm. Because we may need another form of restore confidence, operational restore confidence. I also believe that the law should now say quite clearly that anyone found with an unlicensed firearm will be arrested and no bail given, and that severe penalties will be the results when they are taken to court. Anyone who kills another deliberately should forfeit their own lives if found guilty in the court of law after appeals. They must have that appeal. As I've said before, that God gives life, and he's the only one to take a life. And therefore I go back to the Old Testament, where it clearly states, a tooth for a tooth. And that is what the good book says. So therefore, a life for a life. What is amazing to me, and even being highly educated to an extent, I still find it hard to believe that because one can't get their way, the only solution for them is to kill another that they are in conflict with. How can this be right? How can those people go on living at the state's expense when they're found guilty of willful murder? The Caribbean Court of Justice must now have execution on the books because it is part and parcel of our Constitution. Having now gone to the Caribbean Court of Justice, we now have to use it wisely in terms of murder. I watched the Prime Minister some time ago making his speech in terms of the crime of murder and taking another's life. I shed a tear because he seems distraught. He was feeling every word he said. And I quote, I want to assure St. Lucians that we continue to take the issue of gang warfare seriously. I want to thank the medical and security officials who respond to their tragedies with bravery and professionalism. We are working with the Royal St. Lucian Police Force and the community to restore peace. Our children, the residents and citizens have the right to live and work safely anywhere in this country. So on Saturday, the 11th of March, 2023, some of you might remember, I met with the top officials, he said, of the Royal St. Lucian Police Force. The briefing focused on the carnage of the last 48 hours and the steps being taken to combat gang-related activities and retaliatory practices in the form of, in the tongue of Beaufort, that was at that time, as of Thursday, March 9th to Saturday, March 11th. 7 localized homicides have been reported, apparently in reprisal to the killing of a well-known individual. The Regional Security System, RSS, and other assets have been contacted and will be on the ground early next week. 24-hour SSU patrol is being deployed. The police will be given more resources to assist in this upsurge of violence. I think it should be given far more. And I've mentioned it before, on armored vehicles, everything. In my view, it must be made clear to those St. Lucian young men that no part of the country belongs to them and that they have no right to take another person's life in that manner. Therefore, as mentioned before, with the coming of the CCJ as our final appellate court, we must return to capital punishment. If one is found guilty, after all the evidence is looked at, as I've mentioned before, and an appeal is done, then the individual found to have willfully killed another for no reason, i.e. self-defense, etc., then they must be executed very quickly after the appeal. This violence that has turned into a form of vulgarity must be brought to an end or under control. Law and order must now have one minister running the show and cannot continue to be split. The police must also be dedicated to keep the law and order. And any policeman found to be dishonest, etc., then he must be sacked forthwith and taken to court. The police must also be given the tools to do the job, together with our marine establishment and customs officers. If we have to borrow to make it so, then let the action on that level begin. We also have to take seriously the idea of working with our Caribbean brothers in making sure that policing our seas from guns, drugs, and smugglers requires a joint effort, and legislation must be made clear that anyone caught will be sentenced to between 15 to 20 years. The penalty must be severe. The gloves must now be taken off and let the war begin. The war on crime, more so violent crime. CARICOM seems very good at organizing meetings to talk, and not much action is taken after. I believe that it has become a waste of time and energy. A Caribbean civil force must now be thought of more so on our oceans. There must be some unity in fighting the insurgents of guns and the ammunitions that are being filtered into our countries. Sometimes big money is involved, and therefore it is always the little man or the little woman or children who suffer. We now have to bring an end to this form of suffering by having a joint effort with other Caribbean countries. Some of the killings we have seen cannot be called by any other word but barbaric, because it is of that nature. When individuals have targeted the individual they want to kill, and they can put between 3 to 5 shots into an individual's head. Therefore, there is no other word to describe this form of execution but barbaric and callous. That, in my view, is savagery at the highest level. What gets up my nose is when I hear that some people seem to gloat in regards to the level of crimes that is taking place. So I want to take pictures. Many of those individuals conveniently try to forget under which government we had Operational Restore Confidence and why the Leahy Law was applied. They also forget that the barbaric crime we have at present did not just happen overnight. It took 3 decades to ignite. All that time, it was incubating and nearly unfolded when Operational Restore Confidence had to be brought in under UWP government. Is at this juncture, I'll stop. You could see that I'm getting really carried away and mad at useless killings in this country. I'll be back. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And I was talking about Operational Restore Confidence under the UWP government of the past. And I must say that, yes, crimes of that nature did not just come on the scene overnight. This was festering and incubating over many years and has now come to fruition. I believe that the time has come when we must now equip our policemen and women with tasers, and without hesitation, we must have CCTV cameras everywhere in the country. This is now essential. Heavy operational vehicles must be given to our police force. Raids must be done and planned by 2 or 3 higher echelons in the force. If I have to plead with our diplomatic friends, I will bring this up to them as to whether they could now help us with a loan or aid in order to get those CCTV modern cameras and tasers. We also need all the equipment that the police needs to fight crime of that nature. And as I've said on numerous occasions, and hopefully the powers that be will now listen, and it's that we need more motorcyclists, policemen on our roads all over the country. I saw a chap yesterday with a phone, driving with one hand, and he's talking, taking a corner. That is not on. I also support the PM in the effort to bring in legislation to stiffen the law regarding firearms and ammunition. As I've mentioned before, I also do believe that anyone found guilty of murder, whether in a gang or otherwise, where violence was part and parcel of what took place, should be executed if found guilty. God in his infinite mercy has rescued us from the abyss, and now under the capable leadership of our Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre, that's Joseph Pierre, we are beginning to see some semblance of light at the end of the dark tunnel that was left behind by a foreigner to this country who really did not care whether we sink or swim. I want to continue to ask the question as to who wanted us to go back to the days of colonialism. Why? because this individual convinced himself that it had a conscience. Yet that same individual disrespected our House of Assembly at will because he had no respect for the House Speaker, that is, our people and the way of life that we have. He made no effort to attend the first sittings or 3 sittings of the House, the new House, when we came in 2021. Yet he got paid, even though he had a feeble excuse. He even thought he had the right to abscond from the sitting of the House on the discussion of the CCJ. This guy had the gall and audacity to go directly to the radio station. And from there, to cap it all, he gave the House an uppercut. And when he went on to play, of all the things, golf. You know, another person does that too, Trump. Prior to that, we will remember that he took time off when it suited him, yet getting paid a sum for greater than many of the hardworking citizens of this country. I can tell you that. The question I keep asking myself is how an individual who said that he was not a product of Canada can be our Prime Minister. And now he's literally kicked out, still wanting to return as our Prime Minister, to insult young ladies and their mothers in terms of having children as though they are a curse to the country. Before I forget, at this juncture, let us pray. Father in heaven, send down the Holy Spirit to guide our Prime Minister and his cabinet in the right direction, also at their hour of need, because of the savagery and the devil that has, or devilish intent that has unleashed itself on this beautiful country. And is trying its best to stem the development of the country. The Prime Minister and his cabinet needs your help, O Lord, because so much debt was left behind by the last government, who just thought not of the country, but of family, friends, and foreigners. I know that you will give Philip the helping hand, because goodness and purity of heart floats around him like springtime. And at this juncture, he is without a doubt what the country needs in its development. There are some who are trying their best to cause alarm and despondency, but they will not succeed, because you recognize that this is a good man, not perfect, but is honest. And he has integrity and a caring individual. There's no doubt in my mind that he thinks before he acts and does not take liberty with the country's monies. Father, I have faith in you, because you are without a doubt the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords. Amen, amen. And before going into my verse from the Bible, I want to quote from the Prime Minister's verse, in which he began by saying, as we navigate through the challenges of this world, it is important to remember the power of prayer. So let us come together and pray for peace in our hearts, our homes, our communities, and our world. In the book of the Philippians, chapter 4, verses 7, it says, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. The PM went on to say, may we be the instruments of peace and love in our interaction with others. And may we continue to pray and work towards a country where peace reigns. I say amen to that, Prime Minister. So now tonight I want to quote from the Bible, Proverbs 12, verses 1 to 12. Anyone who loves knowledge wants to be told when he's wrong. It is stupid to hate being corrected. The Lord is pleased with good people, but condemns those who plan evil. Wickedness does not give secure or security, but righteous people stand firm. A good wife is her husband's pride and joy. I hope so. But a wife who brings shame on her husband, or husband shame on his wife, is like a cancer in his bones. Honest people will treat you fairly. The wicked only want to deceive you. The words of wicked men are murderous, but the words of the righteous rescue those who are threatened. Wicked men meet their downfall and leave no descendants, but the families of the righteous men live on. If you are intelligent, you will be praised. If you are stupid, people will look down on you. It is better to be an ordinary man working for a living than to play the part of a great man but go hungry. A good man takes care of his animals, but wicked men are cruel to theirs. A hard-working farmer has plenty to eat, but it is stupid to waste time on useless projects. All that wicked people want is to find evil things to do, but the righteous stands firm. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I use this passage tonight because of the wickedness that seems to permeate our country, more so within families. These are situations that involve mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, even children. When one hears the evil things that are transpiring in families, I'm literally lost for words, honestly. The murders we are seeing right now lies in the attitude of the older family member who passes on their evil ways, some of them to their children. Maybe the education system is to blame too. Therefore, I believe sincerely that the state now has to protect the families who try to bring up their children correctly. And that, in my view, are the majority. We must say quite categorically that enough is enough. No wonder the last Prime Minister thought that 43% of the country's population were mendicants and went on further to call them jackasses and barking dogs. I'll never let him forget that. At times I wonder whether his figures were correct. Should it not be 53% mendicants? Because a lot of people with pieces of paper, i.e. degrees, masters, are good at passing exam, but quite a few still remain stupid because they have an inflated ego because of those little pieces of paper. They're not humble and simply cannot even put what they have learned into practice. Once again, I speak from the heart. And these are the people society has to contend with because they invariably run our country one way or the other. I therefore say loud and clear, and with an anger that we simply have forgotten the importance of the extended family, which had the idiom of we as them, their theme song. Families were united and strong because it was the we. However, today it is the I syndrome. I shudder to think of the blatant dishonesty that seems to be the name of the game within the family. I. Some selling land that they had no authority to do so. Now, as we have seen, some of our people have become greedy, envious, and are now all about self. They commit dishonest acts against their own. How can these people be trusted? How can they move about with the same people they have cheated? They simply have no shame because they just don't have a soul that feels. In my view, hell and damnation awaits them. God in his infinite wisdom is waiting for them to come before him so he can cast them to hell forever. One way or the other, they will have to pay for their misdeeds. Not only now, I want time to remember. Not only now, I want time to remember and to know that if you do the crime, you have to pay for it. One way or the other, whether in this world or in the next. All I can do and say is to have pity on those individuals. In assessing what has taken place in our country, I've come to the conclusion that there is a need for a paradigm shift in our education system. More so, our nursery, primary, tertiary level of education, and that there is a role for these different levels in our schools. This must be an important role in the development of St. Lucia on the whole. The nursery and primary level is vital in the development of any child's life, whether rich or poor. That period of development is crucial because the children are at a stage where their brains are flexible. It is soft and ready to take and to absorb what is passed on to them. I've said it before and I will say it again. It is at this stage in a child's life that we should have the best teachers who are well endowed, meaning well trained, and paid the highest, because the future of the nation is in their hands. They are molding these children. Many seem to think secondary school education is more important, but these are small minds in our midst. It is almost the mind of our colonizers. Money, therefore, have to be found in order for us to transform our nursery and primary education so that all our young children can have an opportunity to be part of the evolution that must take place. Dennis Springer is not the one saying so, but all the top researchers of education are now of one voice. In St. Lucia, we take nursery school education as a joke. Well, it is a serious and important part of a child's life, and it should be part of the educational establishment, hence part of the part and parcel of the state education apparatus. It is my view that we cannot keep training youngsters for jobs that are not there. Criticisms are sometimes made about school leavers, that they seem to lack knowledge of the world of business, which in many cases is small businesses in St. Lucia. We have to encourage our youngsters to think big. These criticisms have to be addressed if we want them to think big. Education is not primarily about the narrow preparation for work, but rather preparation for adult life, in which work and continuing education are a part. It is therefore vital that the educational provision that is being provided, which is most obviously for children and young people, must meet changing social and economic demands. The demands, therefore, must begin at that nursery and primary stages of a young person's life. Looking further ahead, I believe that SALCC is ideally suited both to boost the status of post-16 education and to offer a variety of courses to a diverse student population. I'll take my next break and I'll be back. Hold the line. It's interesting. Welcome back to Moving Forward. I was talking about Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, in the educational terms, SALCC is able to offer breadth of provision for that school. And it must be based on services that are able to match what they have at present. They're also able to bring expert personnel and resources together. That's what should be done. I also believe strongly that we have to now go hard at introducing TVEI at a much faster pace than we are doing presently. However, I want to add that we need to really think very seriously of children's education from 14 to 18. It is important that we try to bring into the country investors, but many are not interested because we don't have the high technology skills that are necessary or needed. This is now essential. And that is where our Taiwanese friends come in. Serious discussions must take place as to how they can help us in setting up schools of that nature or caliber, and to help us with the cost of bringing them on board. In the 21st century and beyond, education will be the foundation of material as well as intellectual progress. The challenge is to develop a tertiary education system adequate to the economic and social demands of the next century. The social requirement must be one in that system that helps each individual realize their full potential and is matched by the economic necessity that is innovative and creative. They must have the capabilities spread throughout the population. The college has to change with the times. and to that end needs to adjust to the changing patterns of work in industry. SALCC must not only train students to be employed, but to be entrepreneurs who will create jobs for the future. There is a major role for SAAFA to play in this thrust for change that will adapt our students for the 21st century. There must also be a place for serious research that can be termed extramural. I am bringing all this to the fore because it is also part of a document I'm putting together in my research, which what I have found is that there are men and women in higher education courses that they do not particularly want to take. Several different factors determine an applicant's entry choices, and it can hardly be expected that all applicants fully understand what is involved in the selections they make, yet acceptance is normally related to a particular course. For example, there is an individual who has been teaching at primary school level for 10 years in this country and has all the necessary subject bar one, which is science. Yet she's not accepted as a teacher or a teacher's training college because of not having that subject. That is total rubbish for me. In England, this would seem ridiculous and absurd. She has English, maths, and etc., but not science. Yet the insistence here is she must have science, which is, in my view, a form of education that still lingers in the prehistoric times. Education, in my view, should respond to economic and technological change. There is a narrow view by some in determining the relationship between education for non-academics, i.e. vocational and technical education, which should be the way forward. We cannot afford to delay any longer. Radical reforms in our provisions must be, but the resource applications need to be understood. As growing number of people seek higher education, accommodation, and lecturing costs will no doubt rise, and it is rising. A major problem will be the lack of suitable lecturers and trainers. It is clear that increased levels of educational participation needs urgently an urgent requirement of investing in the new buildings and equipment that will be needed. As participation grows, capital investment of some magnitude will be required over the next 10 years. Although costs are high, we cannot afford not to incur these expenditures. SALCC is on the move in the area of restructuring plans. As I have been told, that this is in the pipeline, which I'm sure will give the college a more solid base. I hope it's just not words. If that is not happening, then they are not looking forward but backward. And we will continue to have certain educational establishments coming here and giving us poor degrees and an education that is not of any value to the development of this country. In my view, tertiary educational change would therefore structure economic advance, not vice versa, and economic ends would match rather than overrule social goals. In St. Lucia, there is a widespread political recognition of the economic challenge faced by SALCC. Stark reality stares us in the face. That's a fact. Either we remain a low-skill, low-tech, low-wage country, which inevitably leads to a high unemployment economy, which is therefore prone to high crime levels, or we make that leap forward that is necessary to lead the competition for the high value added market of the next decade. There is really no choice at all, as the implications are clear. There's no doubt in my mind that SAAFA must be at the forefront of the high-tech revolution that will be taking place or has taken place in the Caribbean and elsewhere. This is where the paradigm shift should be and must be. The time is ripe, apart from SAAFA, to build another further high-tech college or university in order to accommodate those youngsters, whether boy or girl, who's interested in high-tech as a career. At present, many want this, but having to go overseas, which is costly for them and their families. Hence, why so many are sitting on the block, bored to tears, and therefore gets into crime and the bad ways of life. It is well documented, you know, that in St. Lucia, our existing workforce is comparatively undereducated, and that our education system does not provide the necessary depth and breadth of understanding and skills. Therefore, I see innovation and creativity as being central to high-skill production, and therefore essential to securing economic progress in this country of ours. The importance of higher education to society and its significance as an investment in the future of individuals and in the continued strength of industry, commerce, and the professions means that no single simple line of development can be followed by the system. However, the characteristic features of the sector lie in its variety, more so its flexibility and its responsiveness to national needs of industry, business, the public services, and its openness in terms of one traditional access in its strident effort to accommodate restructuring of the education system. The continued presence of structural unemployment, especially for our young people, must have an effect on the totality of the tertiary education system, as must the extent to which education, particularly some aspects of higher education, is seen as being, on the one hand, a consumer of resources, and on the other hand, a necessary precursor in an investment in industrial regeneration and economic growth. Changes must be brought about, must come forth within great rapidity, particularly if they are radical in their nature. What is needed now is an open debate about possible changes and about the course of action available to the system and to the sectors and institutions within it. Tertiary education can best serve the economy if it helps the whole population develop a broader foundation for critical faculties and innovative capacities. And these are many. In contrast to the drive for relevance to today's economic needs, I want to see a tertiary education system that is geared to economic and social demands that lie ahead. It is the task of job-specific adult training to connect immediate skills shortages. Education must arm young people to face tomorrow's challenge, and this will mean being computer literate and developing high-tech training facilities. To that end, a tripartite agreement between SALC, the government, and the Chamber of Commerce, and other NGOs and academia is necessary and essential. There are others that can become part of that group, mothers and fathers, you name it. Serious dialogue is now necessary, and to the way forward, nothing must be left to chance. We cannot continue to pretend that something is being done and then everything still remains the same. We must always inculcate in our minds that time and tide waits for no man. I believe that in order to implement that type of tertiary education which is needed for the new millennium in St. Lucia, there is no doubt that to enlarge the system will necessitate a substantial amount of capital investment. And with the country's limited resources, this could pose a problem. There's no doubt about that. Therefore, what I would recommend is that the government's technical and vocational education training program be implemented by SALCC if it has not been at this juncture. This would save land costs and the infrastructure needed. Therefore, bring in our Taiwanese friends as quickly as possible in an expansion program that will help us in new technology, agricultural science in a big way, and engineering. Action being taken in the restructuring of the college program will enable it to meet the needs of the 21st century and beyond. I do hope that with this in mind, the powers that be will take my view into consideration just into consideration and act upon it if necessary. Over the years, we have been shooting ourselves in the foot as far as technical education is concerned. When we have a country who is top of the microchip industries in the world and who are our diplomatic friend. They have been given aid and assistance at every level, yet we have not explored the link to technology sufficiently. In my view, we seem not to care in the aid we are being given to develop our learning. However, it is important to point out that aid, whether in hard cash or borrowed, as we saw with the last government, was taken for granted. That was taken for granted. Therefore, the actions we take certainly have the consequences as to how we develop overall and how we pave the way in the development of our youngsters. I'll take my next break and I'll be back. It's interesting. Welcome back to Moving Forward, and I was talking about development of our youngsters, and I'm so glad to once again repeat that how extremely happy I am to hear that $3.5 million EC is being spent for an extension to Sir Arthur Lewis View Fort Complex. That is tremendous news, and I compliment the Ministry of Education for that exciting news once again. In my view, what is there is not big enough for the level of education that is needed in the south of the country. As the minister have said, that it will be of great help in delivering tertiary education to the south of the island. Therefore, that will hopefully extend the range of courses given to the tertiary education in that area, and that it will be a more comfortable learning environment. Minister, I applaud you on this front, and it is a step in the right direction for the government also. However, I believe that the Taiwanese government wants to help Sir Arthur Lewis Community College in Castries in terms of an extension so as to bring in new technology and agricultural science training. However, I have appealed to them, if this should happen, then engineering should be a must. Now, on another front, I go back to the 29th of November 2022. When I listened to the leader of the opposition talking about the division in the party, it was the time when Mr. Oswald Augustine had asked for the leader to step down, and then he was re-elected as General Secretary. The leader said that it was an internal matter, and that given where this country was heading, we have to think of holding the government accountable to the pressures it has to be put on government in terms of St. Jude, which he said is a disaster. I want to say, yes, it was a disaster of his making and government. Also, the HIA fiasco, which they dismantled when a deal was already arranged, which would not have cost the country a cent. But they threw it out and went on to borrow millions that the country could not simply afford. Because, remember he said it was broke and did not have any money. Here is the same guy as Prime Minister, when he was Prime Minister, who glorified in the idea of bringing the sport of kings to St. Lucia. However, to do this, he spent millions of dollars on that project. And who was controlling the project? A Chinese man, whom he also gave a hand in our CIP program. St. Lucians, you must not forget that, more so when this individual tells us about this present government. Not only that, here's the same individual who told us in an eloquent voice that he was a product of Canada, and again eloquently told us that colonialism had a conscience. I ask sensible St. Lucians to look and search into their minds and heart and soul and try to answer that question seriously for themselves. Can this individual be a patriot who cares about the country? I can assure you that if this individual had stayed in power, he would have sold all St. Lucia, lock, stock, and barrel, even its people, to foreigners, more so the so-called whites or Chinese that he is part and parcel of. He would certainly ruin everything that was good about this country. I want to tell the present leader of opposition that I know for sure that there will come a day when justice will roll down like a mighty streak. And all those who have abused their power in terms of alleged corruption will feel the pain and anguish that will inevitably come, whether in this life or in the one or in the other life to come. I believe that this government cannot allow those reprobates to get away with their callousness, greed, and alleged corruption and mismanagement of the country and economy. I don't want it to be about revenge and vindictiveness, but about justice and doing what is right. This will send a message to others that alleged corruption has a serious and debilitating effect on the poor and the very poor, more so those who are destitute through ill health, etc. A stand must be made, and this government of Philip Joseph Pierre, I said Joseph, is taking that stand. Well, I say loudly and unequivocally with that voice of mine tonight, thank you, Lord, for giving us an elected black prime minister. I know and acknowledge that he is not perfect, but he has integrity, honesty, and the patriotism which is running in his blood stream and veins. I think highly of him, even though he may not see me in the same manner, but see me just as an academic. I don't mind. Tonight, once again, I want to congratulate the government in doing what is right as far as this democratic, independent country is concerned. I applaud them in taking that first step in decolonizing our minds and thinking in terms of moving away from the Privy Council as our final appellate court. I've said it before and I'll say it again, especially to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now we must go after these killers in our midst, and they must suffer the same penalties that they hand out to others. We must, however, make sure that we have, as I said before, a police force that is up to the task, even though we have to employ from overseas. We also need to give the police, again I say, the tools to do the job of catching and punishing those villains in our midst. We must send a message to the villains the villains that enough is enough. And that if you take a life willfully, then you have to forfeit yours. That is what the good book says. I repeat it and keep repeating it. We must never forget that we are still a country of laws, and therefore law and order is pivotal and paramount if we are to develop and grow, and if the tourists will not be stopped from country to country or our country. I believe sincerely that everyone has a role to play in the aspects of law and order, because it is everybody's business, as I've said before on numerous occasions. We cannot look and say that it is happening in Vieux Fort, and therefore we in Castries must turn a blind eye the other way. Right now, murders are being committed in many parts of the country, in Castries. What many don't seem to realize is that it is on everybody's doorstep, and not just the government and the police or the law enforcers, individuals. We must wake up, St. Lucians, and smell the smoke of the gunfire that is taking place. When I hear the opposition speak about crime, they forget that the breeding ground was there when they were in power. Those who did not know will have thought they were a paragon of virtue. Well, I'm indeed happy to say with a clarity of heart that it is commendable that the new United Labour Party and we, with 2 independent ministers, are taking a methodological and scientific approach in assessing the state of the St. Lucian economy and its finances. This is with a view to plan and implement and propose policies and programs. They have realized that they cannot procrastinate because they are fully aware that it is the thief of time. Well, everything happens for a reason, but it's important that those who seem overwrought with unjust criticism of this government look back and ask why their government were kicked out of office. The answer is simply to analyze, because they were an inefficient government, and demonic one at that. Well, once again tonight, I hope that I have been honest as to what I have had to say, and those who want to take a swipe by making silly comments like singing for supper, well, I have sung for it. Let me make it clear, though, that I turned down their party when they were in power because I stood for what was right and just. It is the same with this government. Now, all I'm interested in is to feed ourselves as a nation and to weed out the crime element or criminal element that is in our country. We must not waste any time. And what I have now put forward to you, the people in this country, I've asked our Taiwanese friends to help us in whether it's aid, loan, or kind. It is important that we bring these areas of our lives under control. As always, again, I've tried to be honest. And I ask every citizen of this country to work unceasingly to lift this nation that we so love to a higher destiny, to a new plateau of compassion, and to a more noble expression of humanness. Therefore, it is by working together and cooperating together we will achieve what is required for this great country of ours. So tonight, my friends, once again, I ask the Almighty to bless you all and keep us safe by bringing to this country some semblance or signs of peace and unity. With this, I say to you all, whether in St. Lucia or in the diaspora, to go in peace and give praise and thanks to the One Most High, because he's, after all, the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Amen. But never forget that he made us all in his own image and likeness. Therefore, again, go in peace, and to never forget that we are black and should be proud of it. Blessed love to you all. Good night and good night.